This meant removing the main body shell. They had hoped to be able to restore much of the original bodywork, but unfortunately it was in a worse state than anyone had feared. Cue Rob and his sledgehammer.
This is the good bit.
We're still in all the bits that we couldn't save.
Yeah.
And it gives you some idea of just how distressed the original van was.
Everything you touch, it's just diseased, you know. And the problem is that although the woodworm's long gone, the dry rot is still here with a vengeance, and it absolutely stank inside this van.
We knew from the beginning what a task we were taking on, didn't we?
Joiners Joe and Kev are currently putting together the interior wall panels. They've already built the frame and are gluing on the plywood sheets that make up the inner walls. The glue, incidentally, is not your average PVA adhesive. It's an extremely expensive, quick-setting glue that doesn't mind the wet and cold, but unfortunately costs 35 quid a bottle. Obviously, at that price, you can't afford to mess about, so everything has been test-fitted prior to sticking. To hold it in place while the glue is going off, the guys are using some wood screws. We'll be back to see a little more from our Caravan restoration team a little later in the programme. Whilst not much of the original bodywork of the 1950s Berkeley Statesman may remain, there are still plenty of parts that can be used.
Right, with everything from racing cars to caravans, you might have heard the phrase sprung and unsprung weight. And it's all about dynamics, and basically it's a term that we engineers use to confuse everybody else and make ourselves sound intelligent. What you've got is this big cart spring here, which hasn't changed for centuries really, and either end of it is a link called a shackle. These shackles are rather tapered, but they still sort of work. And everything below the spring, including the springs, the axle and the wheels, is all your unsprung weight, because that's sat on the road. Everything above the spring, like the whole body of the Caravan, is sprung weight.
Once Rob has stripped everything down, the springs and axle can be shot blasted, painted up, and they'll be as good as new. Well, almost. Tim hopes that the same company that'll revamp the axle may be able to fabricate some new roof panels, and he's taking them over for them to have a look at. A couple of other elements that are beyond all saving are the wheel arches. Tim has had new ones made from galvanised steel. They've been made with brackets fitted so that they can be easily screwed to the bodywork. This part of the operation is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. There are a few other components to go in around all this, such as a new shower tray, an original cupboard, and the small matter of a wall and doorway. The restoration of the 1950s Berkeley Statesman double-decker Caravan Classic is starting to turn the corner. Having virtually demolished the original, the team are now putting the reclaimed parts of the old Caravan, along with many new parts, back together. To make a perfect fit of the new wheel arches, the guys must trim a little bit off the walls and floorboards. Once they're happy, they make a couple of temporary brackets to sit them on so that they can double check that everything is square before finally screwing it in place. This new section of wall will form part of the bathroom, into which must be recessed an original cupboard. The guys have also kept the original door frame to check they've got it right. Well, it all seems to fit so far. The wall and floor around the other wheel arch also needs a bit of trimming, but once done, it'll be as good as new. Sadly, the engineering company were not able to help with the roof. More of that later, but they have made a lovely job of the old axle. Tim has also put up a new stainless steel shower tray that he's had made, and he's keen to see if all his measurements and calculations have been correct. He's got it right. So now the shower tray can be popped somewhere safe for a while, and Kev can now make the feature that no good bathroom should be without: the plug hole. Despite some horribly cold weather, the team have cracked on with the walls, and the interior lining is pretty much complete. And I expect you've noticed the insulation panels that are currently going in. Still to go on the outside are the aluminium wall panels. They've been bought off the shelf and comprise of 8x4 sheets of 0.9mm aluminium, bonded onto 6mm marine ply.
What we're going to do with this is just offer it up here and check that the timber will fit across the gap we've got. It should do. They were 8x by 4x sheets originally. So if we put that about 50-50 on there, then I'll have a quick squint underneath. We've got more than enough board. Right, so what we're going to have to do with this is router the wood off the back of the aluminium, so that we've got a small piece, and then cut the aluminium back, so we've got a small overhang on 3 sides, bottom and the 2 sides, which when the next piece of wood and aluminium sandwich is stuck on the side, we can fold the aluminium round, fold it round underneath and trap it with the beading. Because obviously we can't punch any holes through here to screw it on. So we'll glue it to the frame once we're absolutely certain that the wood's the right size, and then fold the aluminium round to suit.
The roof section is obviously going to be a bit more tricky, and Tim and Rob had hoped to get it sorted by a local engineering company, but it was going to be very difficult to weld the 8x4 sheets without getting warping and buckling. So Tim has had to resort to plan B.
Instead, we've gone with having one continuous roll of aluminium. It's 30 foot long by about 8'4". But of course, the problem with that is we've got a very heavy piece of aluminium to manoeuvre. We're actually going to have to lift this up onto the roof and then roll it out on the roof and then in situ cut it to size. We're only going to get one hit at it. I'm a little nervous about it because you can imagine there's a lot of money there and a lot of weight. So we need a perfectly still day with no wind at all. If any wind gets hold of this, it'll just blow away like the sail on a ship.
Kev has already started with his router on the aluminium wall panels, and in the next programme you'll see the Berkeley start to change into a gleaming piece of caravanning art. And in this programme, Tim and his team of restorers are really starting to make headway with the last remaining Berkeley Statesman. Though he's no stranger to restoration work, when Tim Mitchinson first acquired the 1950s double-decker Berkeley Statesman, even he didn't realise quite what he was taking on. He's had plenty of assistance from his mate Rob Norton and a team of craftsmen. So far, they've removed the bodywork, rebuilt the chassis, demolished the old bodywork, rebuilt it again, renovated the axle, and completed a host of other jobs.
We'll put that about 50-50 on.
Well, things are starting to take shape. It's been fairly chaotic. It's still a building site. There's a lot left to do, but I would say we're about 3/4 of the way into the project now. The framework's up, the inner skin's up. The inner structure is supported there, the bed's in. Now we're looking at the outside of the vehicle, and this is where we could make a mistake and it all goes wrong somewhere down the road. We've got to make sure everything's watertight, we've got to make sure that everything's rigid and firmly fixed.
The job in hand at the moment is making the roof panels. A substantial wooden framework has already been built, bar a few crucial components. The roof has rather a lot of curves, and it would be impossible to bend timber as thick as the rest of the frame, so Joe and Kev, the joiners, have built a jig and are gluing together strips of flexible ply.
I've got cramp on there. Alright, I've got it.
Once in place, the large sheets of ply can then be added. These vary in thickness from 5mm over the curved section to 9mm on parts of the roof, which may at some point in the future be used as a deck area. Eventually all of this will be covered with an aluminium skin, and a very large roll of it is currently sitting in the storeroom. We'll be back to see more progress with the Berkeley in a few minutes. When the Berkeley Statesman was first launched in 1951, it incorporated some rather stylish furniture, much of it in oak. Sadly, next to none of the original was salvageable, so Tim's employed the services of some cabinet makers he knows to help him out. Because of the time schedule, the work is being split between a team in his hometown of York and some others based in London. Andrew, part of the York team, has the task of recreating a wardrobe originally built decades before he was even born.
The differences on this new one and the original is I've beefed up the doors so they don't warp as much as the old ones, and I've also made the joints a lot stronger.
When finished, this wardrobe will live in the upstairs bedroom. Meanwhile in London, Austin and Andrew are busy with building beds, cupboards and a rather lovely sideboard.
It's been fantastic actually. It's been really exciting. It's like working with no plans at all. We've had to look at the photos that we've had of the original brochures and then just work out from the vague measurements we've got of the Caravan. So we've had to, it's kind of seat of your pants carpentry really.
All on a bit of a deadline as well.
But it's been exciting. With the Caravan in mind, it's all very lightweight. And so it's all designed to look as if it's a lot heavier than it is. So all the frameworks underneath are just like a lightweight pine framework. And then all of the more expensive looking wood goes on the outside. These are methods that my partner and I don't really use these days. And so it's interesting to look back on how they were doing things before. And actually there are methods here that we're looking at and we're thinking, oh, actually we could use some of that.
Tim Mitchinson is painstakingly restoring a unique piece of caravanning history, 1950s double-decker Berkeley Statesman. One of the items Tim had hoped to salvage was the staircase. Unfortunately, it was riddled with dry rot and was home to some nesting butterflies. Joe and Kev, the carpenters, have been given the task of building a replacement. Using the original as a template, they're making the new one out of ply. They're using a router to cut a recess into the side panels into which the stair treads will fit. The stairs actually turn a corner, and the guys have made the bottom steps separately.